Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Claire Killingback and I'm a senior lecturer in physiotherapy, and in this video I'm going to talk through one of the most powerful study techniques out there, which is active recall. And this I'm hoping will be really helpful for you if you're a first year student and you are trying to learn all of that foundational anatomy and physiology for your physiotherapy practice. Imagine you're preparing for an exam and you have spent hours reading your notes, highlighting the relevant texts, and then you sit down to take the exam and your mind goes blank. Sound familiar? That is where active recall comes in, because it's not about just passively reading the information, it's about actively engaging with the content. So what is active recall? Essentially, it's a learning method where you try and test your knowledge by remembering information without looking at your notes. It's like giving yourself a mini quiz. And I was so happy the other day when at the start of one of my lessons, I overheard one of the students saying to some of the others, "So what does evidence-informed practice mean?" And then the other students responded based on what they'd learnt. That is such a good example of active recall because it's quizzing yourself and it's trying to remember what you know already, but without looking at your notes. And this is so important because that process of trying to remember is what strengthens those neural pathways in your brain so that you can actively recall the information when you need it, such as when you're doing one of your exams. Think of it this way. If your brain were a muscle, active recall would be like doing reps at the gym. And so if you put the two study techniques side by side, so think about reading your notes and highlighting versus active recall where you're actively trying to remember things, the difference I guess would be like if you go to the gym and you just sat and watched everyone else exercising, well you'd be there, you'd be at the gym, but you're not necessarily going to get any fitter. And that's kind of what it's like when you read your notes, as opposed to when you actively recall that information. That's when you get into the gym and you get stuck in doing reps, and that is how you're going to get stronger and how you're going to actively recall all that information you need. And so each time you try to recall the information, you're exercising your memory and you're making it stronger and more efficient. Research has shown that active recall is one of the most effective study methods out there. And here are 4 reasons why. First of all, it identifies your knowledge gaps because as you're trying to actively recall information and you realise, oh yeah, I don't remember that bit, then you know where the gap is in your learning and where you need to be investing with your time. Secondly, it improves long-term retention because the act of actively recalling strengthens your memory more than just rereading information. Thirdly, it simulates test conditions. By practicing recall, you're preparing yourself for that exam environment. And lastly, it's more time efficient because you spend your time working on the stuff that you still need to learn rather than just reviewing things you already know. So that's kind of why it works. Now let's talk about how you could actively be using it for revising. I've got 5 different ways you can pick from. So in its very simplest, most basic form, don't neglect old-fashioned flashcards. So you write the question on one side and then you have the answer on the other and you test yourself regularly. This was how I learned all of my anatomy and physiology many years ago. So you might have, for example, on one side of the card, the elbow joint is a complex of which 3 joints? And then you have the answer on the other. Or if you're thinking about learning some of your more neurological stuff, so you could have questions which are the sciatic nerve divides into which 2 peripheral nerves. And so in that way, you can have a whole stack of flashcards for what you need to learn, and you just keep testing and testing and testing yourself. And as soon as you know it, that's it. You don't need to test yourself on that one anymore. You can pull in the newer ones for you to be learning. The second option you've got is by doing practice tests. And so that's where you can create your own practice tests, find practice questions related to the study material. But also remember your lecturers probably will have provided lots of test quizzes for you. So don't neglect those, really make the most of them and use those practice quizzes. If you're someone who's a bit of a perfectionist and you're like, oh, but I'm not getting 100%, and then you're getting really annoyed with yourself, you just need to approach it as this is part of you developing, you're learning and growing. So it's completely fine if you don't get 100% because it's about you testing yourself, aren't you? It's yourself you're working to improve things with. So use those practice quizzes. The third suggestion I've got for you is what's sometimes called the blank page method. So that's where you literally start with a blank page and you write down everything you remember about a particular topic. So maybe you're trying to learn the stages of healing or the inflammatory process. Just writing out everything you know on that topic and then looking at your notes will help you see where you need to fill in some of those gaps. My fourth suggestion for you is teaching someone else. If you can explain a concept to another person, that really forces you to recall and organise information. So practicing doing that is such a helpful way for you to actively recall that information. And then my final suggestion for you is you can use apps. You know, there are many apps that are designed for active recall. So look at something like Anki or Quizlet, and I'll put the link to those in the comment section below in the information so that you can click on those links and then you can devise your own questions. Remember with this, the key is to test yourself before looking at the answers. And this might feel super uncomfortable at first, but that is where the learning happens. That is where you are doing your equivalent of doing the reps in the gym. So let me just close with some tips for success. Okay, so to make the most of your active recall, you really need to start early. Don't wait until right before your exam. You need to start week 1 of university with your modules, with developing your flashcards or whatever method you're going to use. You must start early. And be kind to yourself. Embrace the struggle. You won't know it all the first time, and that's okay. It's that process of pushing and making it feel uncomfortable that is going to help you develop the learning. And then linked to that is about being consistent. So you must make sure you are testing and retesting yourself on it rather than cramming everything at the last minute. That won't help you long term. And then lastly, combine it with other techniques. So active recall alongside spaced repetition is probably the most effective thing you can be doing. So check out my other video on spaced repetition to help with that. So if you use active recall well, it can be a total game changer for you in terms of a study technique. So give it a go and see how you get on with it. And I will see you in another video. Good luck with the studying.